Sarah Martinez walked across the university campus with her head held high, despite the whispers and snickers that followed her everywhere. Her combat boots clicked against the concrete pathways as students pointed at her army surplus jacket and tactical pants. Some openly laughed, others took photos with their phones, and a few made cruel comments loud enough for her to hear. "Look at the wannabe soldier," one fraternity brother called out from his group near the fountain. "Does she think she's going to war or something?" His friends erupted in laughter, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She pulled her backpack straps tighter and quickened her pace toward the library. This had been her daily routine for 3 months now, ever since she started her freshman year at Riverside University. The other students saw her military-style clothing as some kind of costume or desperate attempt for attention. What they didn't know was that Sarah had grown up on military bases around the world. Her father was a career Army officer, and her mother worked as a military contractor. The clothes weren't a fashion statement or an act of rebellion. They were simply what felt natural to her, what reminded her of home and the values she'd been raised with. As she entered the librarian, Mrs. Chen, gave her a sympathetic smile. Mrs. Chen was one of the few people on campus who treated Sarah with genuine kindness. The older woman had noticed how the other students behaved toward Sarah and had made an effort to create a safe space for her in the quiet corners of the library. "How are you holding up today, dear?" Mrs. Chen asked, quietly as Sarah passed the circulation desk. "I'm fine," Sarah replied, though her voice betrayed her frustration. "Just focusing on my studies." She made her way to her usual spot in the back corner, where she could study in peace. Opening her textbooks, Sarah tried to concentrate on her engineering coursework. But the morning's encounters kept replaying in her mind. She wondered if transferring to another school might be the answer, somewhere she could start fresh without the constant ridicule. During lunch, Sarah sat alone at a table near the campus food court. She watched groups of students laughing together, sharing stories about their weekends and making plans for upcoming events. Nobody invited her to join them. Nobody seemed interested in getting to know the person behind the military gear. A group of sorority girls at a nearby table were particularly loud in their discussion about the upcoming homecoming dance. Sarah overheard one of them mention how they should organize a theme party, where everyone dressed as different stereotypes. "We could have someone dress like that weird military girl," one suggested, causing the entire table to burst into giggles. "It would be so funny." Sarah's appetite disappeared entirely. She packed up her lunch and headed back to her dorm room, where she spent the rest of the afternoon questioning whether she belonged at this university at all. Her roommate, Jessica, was rarely around, preferring to stay with friends in other dorms to avoid the social stigma of being associated with Sarah. That evening, Sarah video called her parents, who were currently stationed in Germany. Her father, Colonel Martinez, immediately noticed her dejected expression. "What's wrong, mija?" he asked, using the Spanish nickname he'd called her since childhood. Sarah hesitated before explaining the situation at school. She told them about the constant mockery, the isolation, and how she was beginning to doubt her decision to attend Riverside University. Her mother, Maria, listened intently while her father's expression grew more serious. "Sarah, you have every right to dress however makes you comfortable," her mother said firmly. "Those students don't understand what military life is really about. They've never had to move every few years, adapt to new cultures, or understand the sacrifices military families make." Colonel Martinez nodded in agreement. "Your strength and resilience come from the life you've lived, Sarah. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of who you are or where you come from. Sometimes people mock what they don't understand." After the call ended, Sarah lay on her narrow dorm bed staring at the ceiling. Her parents' words were comforting, but they didn't make facing her classmates any easier. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through social media, seeing posts from her high school friends who seemed to be thriving at their respective colleges. They were making friends, joining clubs, and enjoying the typical college experience that seemed so elusive to her. The next morning brought more of the same treatment. As Sarah walked to her early morning chemistry class, she passed the same group of fraternity brothers from the day before. This time, one of them had apparently prepared a joke specifically for her arrival. "10 Hut," he shouted in a mock military voice, saluting dramatically. "The general is approaching." The group doubled over with laughter as other passing students turned to see what the commotion was about. Sarah's face reddened, but she forced herself to keep walking. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her react. Her father had taught her that dignity was something no one could take away unless you surrendered it yourself. In chemistry class, Sarah took her usual seat in the front row. Professor Williams had assigned group projects for the semester, and, as he began announcing the partnerships, Sarah's stomach twisted with anxiety. She knew what was coming. When her name was called along with 3 other students, she saw them exchange looks of dismay. "Great," one of them muttered under his breath. "We got the Army girl." Sarah pretended not to hear the comment, but it stung deeply. She realized that her appearance had created a barrier that prevented her classmates from seeing her intelligence, her dedication to her studies, or her genuine desire to contribute meaningfully to group work. They had already decided who she was based solely on her clothing choices, and nothing she said or did seemed capable of changing their minds. As weeks turned into months, the situation at Riverside University only seemed to worsen for Sarah. The initial curiosity about her appearance had evolved into systematic exclusion from social activities, study groups, and even academic discussions. Her professors noticed her excellent work and participation in class, but her fellow students continued to treat her as an outsider. The chemistry group project became a particular source of stress. Her 3 teammates, Brad, Ashley, and Kevin, consistently scheduled meetings without informing her. When she would show up to class having prepared extensive research and calculations, she would discover they had already divided the work among themselves and made decisions about their presentation. "Oh, Sarah, we tried to text you," Ashley would say with false sweetness. "Your phone must not have been working." Sarah knew this was a lie. She checked her phone constantly, hoping for some sign that her classmates wanted to include her. The isolation was becoming unbearable, and her grades began to suffer as her motivation declined. She started skipping meals in the cafeteria to avoid the stares and whispered comments. One particularly difficult afternoon, Sarah was walking past the student union building when she overheard a conversation that stopped her in her tracks. A group of students was discussing the upcoming career fair, where various companies and organizations would be recruiting on campus. "I heard the military recruiters are coming," one student said with obvious disdain. "Perfect for that weird girl who dresses like she's going to combat every day. Someone should tell her they're looking for actual soldiers, not people playing dress-up," another added, causing the group to laugh. Sarah ducked behind a pillar, her hands shaking with a mixture of anger and humiliation. The irony of their comments was almost unbearable. These students had no idea that she probably knew more about military life than most actual recruits. She had lived on bases across 3 different continents, had watched her father deploy multiple times, and had experienced the unique challenges of being a military child. That evening, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She decided to attend the career fair, not to prove anything to her classmates, but to explore opportunities that might align with her background and interests. She researched the companies that would be attending and was surprised to find that several aerospace and defense contractors would be present, along with various branches of the military. The night before the career fair, Sarah spent hours preparing. She updated her resume, highlighting her international experience, her fluency in 3 languages, and her technical skills. She researched each company thoroughly, preparing thoughtful questions about their internship programs and entry-level opportunities. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of purpose and excitement. The morning of the career fair, Sarah dressed in her usual military-inspired outfit, but this time she added a few professional touches. She wore her father's old Army pin on her jacket lapel and carried a leather portfolio her mother had given her for graduation. As she walked across campus toward the convention center, she could feel the familiar stares and hear the whispered comments, but they bothered her less today. The convention center was bustling with students in business attire, moving between booths and handing out resumes. Sarah felt slightly out of place among the sea of dark suits and conservative dresses, but she reminded herself that authenticity was more valuable than conformity. Her first stop was the booth for Raytheon Technologies, a major defense contractor. The recruiter, a middle-aged man named Tom Peterson, looked up as she approached. Sarah expected to see the familiar look of judgment or amusement, but instead, Tom's face lit up with genuine interest. "That's a nice army pin," he said, noticing the detail on her jacket. "Family in the service?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her confidence growing. "My father is Colonel Martinez, currently stationed in Germany. I grew up on military bases around the world." Tom's demeanor changed completely. He leaned forward with obvious enthusiasm and began asking Sarah detailed questions about her international experience. They talked for nearly 20 minutes about the challenges of living in different cultures, the importance of adaptability, and how military families develop unique perspectives on global affairs. "You know, Sarah," Tom said as their conversation wound down, "we're always looking for interns who understand the military mindset and can bring that perspective to our civilian operations. Your background is exactly what we need." Sarah left the Raytheon booth with Tom's business card and a promise that he would personally review her application for their summer internship program. For the first time in months, someone had seen her military connection as an asset rather than a joke. Her next stop was the Boeing booth, where she met Maria Santos, a young engineer who had graduated from a military academy. Maria immediately recognized Sarah's tactical pants as genuine military surplus rather than a fashion statement. "Smart choice, wearing actual gear instead of the fake stuff they sell at department stores," Maria said with a grin. "Where did you get those boots? They look like they could handle some serious terrain." The conversation flowed naturally as Maria shared her own experiences transitioning from military academy life to the civilian corporate world. She explained how companies like Boeing valued employees who understood military culture and could effectively communicate with their government contracts. Sarah visited several more booths throughout the day, each interaction building her confidence. She spoke with representatives from Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and even NASA. Each recruiter seemed genuinely impressed by her background and her technical knowledge. As the day progressed, Sarah noticed that other students were beginning to take notice of her interactions with the recruiters. She overheard snippets of conversation as students wondered why the defense contractors were spending so much time talking with that Army girl. The most significant encounter of the day came at the U.S. Army booth, where she met Sergeant First Class Rodriguez. He was a veteran recruiter who had worked with military families for over a decade. When Sarah approached his booth, he immediately stood and extended his hand in greeting. "Ma'am, it's a pleasure to meet you," he said with obvious respect. "I can tell by your bearing that you're from a military family." Sarah was surprised by his formal greeting. Most people her age were greeted casually, but Sergeant Rodriguez treated her with the same respect he would show any member of a military family. They discussed various opportunities within the Army, including officer programs and specialized technical positions. The day after the career fair, Sarah noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere around campus. Word had spread about her successful interactions with the military and aerospace recruiters, and while most students still maintained their distance, the open mockery had decreased somewhat. Some classmates even seemed curious about her conversations with the recruiters, though none were brave enough to approach her directly. However, the core group of students who had been most cruel to her seemed determined to escalate their behavior. Brad from her chemistry group was particularly vindictive, apparently frustrated that Sarah's military connections might actually benefit her academically and professionally. During their next group meeting, which Sarah was finally included in, after Professor Williams intervened, Brad made several snide comments about her military contacts and suggested that she was trying to gain unfair advantages through nepotism rather than merit. "I guess when you can't make it on your own abilities, you have to rely on Daddy's connections," he said while the others worked on their presentation slides. Sarah looked up from her calculations, her patience finally wearing thin. "Actually, Brad, I've maintained a 3.8 GPA while working 20 hours a week in the campus lab. My military background taught me discipline and work ethic, not shortcuts." The room fell silent. It was the first time Sarah had directly confronted any of their comments, and her calm, measured response caught everyone off guard. Ashley and Kevin exchanged glances, perhaps realizing for the first time that their assumptions about Sarah might be incorrect. Brad, however, seemed even more irritated by her response. Whatever, just don't expect special treatment because your dad plays soldier. The comment about her father playing soldier crossed a line that Sarah hadn't even realized existed within herself. Colonel Martinez had served 3 combat tours, had earned numerous commendations for his service, and had dedicated his entire adult life to protecting his country. The casual dismissal of his sacrifices ignited something fierce within Sarah. "Father doesn't play anything," she said, her voice steady but with an edge that made everyone in the room pay attention. "He served in combat zones while you were playing video games in your suburban bedroom. He's earned every rank through dedication and sacrifice, and he's trained soldiers who've saved lives in real combat situations." The room remained quiet for several long moments. Brad seemed to realize he had pushed too far, but his pride prevented him from backing down completely. The meeting ended awkwardly, with their group project still incomplete and tensions running higher than ever. That weekend, Sarah decided to call her father and tell him about the incident. Colonel Martinez listened quietly as she explained the situation, including Brad's comment about him playing soldier. "Sarah," her father said when she finished, "some people will never understand what military service really means. They see it as a game or a career choice, not as a calling to serve, something bigger than yourself. Don't let their ignorance diminish your pride in our family's service." He paused for a moment before continuing. "But I want you to remember something important. The real measure of a person isn't how they treat those who can benefit them, but how they treat those they perceive as powerless. Your classmates are showing you exactly who they are." Her father's words resonated deeply with Sarah. She realized that her time at Riverside University was teaching her valuable lessons about character, resilience, and standing up for her values, even when it was difficult. The following week brought an unexpected opportunity. Professor Williams announced that their chemistry class had been selected to participate in a special demonstration for visiting high school students who were considering STEM majors. The demonstration would take place on the main campus quad, and several group projects would be featured. Sarah's group was among those chosen to present their research on sustainable energy solutions. Despite the ongoing tension with Brad, they had managed to complete an impressive project that combined innovative chemistry with practical applications for military operations in remote locations. The day of the demonstration arrived with perfect weather. The campus quad was filled with high school students, their parents, university faculty, and local community members. Several news outlets had sent reporters to cover the event, as the university was trying to promote its STEM programs and attract more diverse students. Sarah arrived early to help set up their display booth. She wore her usual military-inspired outfit, but she had added a white lab coat that clearly identified her as one of the student researchers. Several high school students immediately gravitated toward their booth, fascinated by the practical applications of their sustainable energy research. One young girl, probably about 16 years old, approached Sarah directly. "Are you really a college student?" she asked with obvious admiration. "You look so cool and professional." Sarah smiled, remembering how she had felt at that age when she met impressive older students. "Yes, I'm a freshman here studying chemical engineering. What brings you to the STEM fair?" The girl, who introduced herself as Maya, explained that she was interested in both engineering and military service. Her older brother was currently deployed overseas, and she wanted to find ways to use science and technology to support military operations. "I love your style," Maya said, gesturing to Sarah's outfit. "It looks like you're serious about what you do, not like you're trying to impress anyone." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several university administrators, including Dean Patterson and the president of the university, Dr. Elizabeth Harper. They were conducting a tour for potential donors and community leaders, highlighting the school's commitment to practical, real-world education. As they approached Sarah's booth, she stood up straighter and prepared to present their research professionally. Dean Patterson introduced their project to the group, praising the innovative approach and practical applications. Dr. Harper asked several technical questions about their methodology, which Sarah answered confidently and thoroughly. Her military upbringing had taught her to communicate clearly with authority figures, and her genuine passion for the research showed in every response. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we want to encourage," Dr. Harper told the group of visitors. "These students are solving real problems that could have significant impact on both civilian and military applications." One of the community leaders, a retired general named William Hayes, seemed particularly interested in Sarah's explanations. After the official tour moved on, he returned to their booth to continue the conversation. "Young lady," General Hayes said, "your presentation was outstanding. You have a natural ability to explain complex technical concepts in ways that non-experts can understand. That's a rare and valuable skill." Sarah thanked him for the compliment, and they began discussing the intersection of military needs and civilian technological innovation. General Hayes shared stories about his experiences with military research and development, and how the best solutions often came from unexpected sources. As their conversation continued, other visitors to the fair began to take notice. Sarah found herself at the center of several interconnected discussions about science, technology, and military applications. Her booth became one of the most popular stops for visitors, and several professors from other departments stopped by to learn more about their research. The success at the STEM fair had given Sarah a boost of confidence, but it also seemed to intensify the hostility from certain students who resented her growing recognition. Brad's antagonism reached new levels, and he began recruiting other students to join his campaign of exclusion and ridicule. The situation escalated during a particularly challenging week in October. Sarah had been selected to represent her chemistry class at a regional academic conference, an honor that typically went to upperclassmen with established research records. Professor Williams had chosen her based on her exceptional work and her ability to communicate complex concepts clearly, qualities that had been evident during the STEM fair. When the announcement was made in class, Sarah felt a surge of pride and accomplishment. Finally, her hard work and dedication were being recognized in a meaningful way. However, her joy was short-lived as she overheard conversations in the hallway after class. "Can you believe they chose the military freak over actual qualified students?" Brad said loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "She probably got selected because of her sob story about growing up on army bases." "It's totally unfair," Ashley agreed. "There are so many other students who deserve that opportunity more than she does." Sarah quickened her pace, trying to escape the hurtful comments, but similar conversations seemed to follow her everywhere, on campus. Students who had previously ignored her were now actively discussing her selection, with most expressing skepticism about her qualifications and suggesting that her military background had given her unfair advantages. The pressure intensified when someone created an anonymous social media account dedicated to mocking Sarah's appearance and achievements. Photos of her walking to class were posted with cruel captions, and the account gained followers rapidly among students who enjoyed the mean-spirited content. One particularly painful post showed Sarah eating alone in the cafeteria with the caption, "When you dress like a soldier but can't even find anyone willing to eat with you." The comment section filled with laughing emojis and additional cruel remarks. Sarah's roommate Jessica finally broke her silence about the situation. "Look, Sarah, I don't want to get involved in drama, but this whole thing is getting out of hand. Maybe if you just dressed more normally, people would give you a chance." The suggestion that Sarah should change her authentic self to gain acceptance from people who had never bothered to get to know her was devastating. She realized that even Jessica, who had lived with her for months, saw her as the problem rather than recognizing the cruelty of their classmates' behavior. That night, Sarah seriously considered withdrawing from the academic conference. The thought of representing her university, while knowing that many of her fellow students questioned her worthiness, was almost unbearable. She drafted an email to Professor Williams explaining that she no longer felt comfortable attending the conference, but she couldn't bring herself to send it. Instead, she called her mother, who was currently between assignments and available, to talk. Maria Martinez listened as Sarah explained the social media harassment, the constant questioning of her achievements, and her growing desire to simply give up and transfer to another school. "Mija," her mother said gently, "do you remember when we were stationed in South Korea And you were the only American girl in your class at the international school? Sarah remembered. She had been 12 years old and felt completely out of place among students from dozens of different countries. Yes, but that was different. Those kids were curious about American culture, not mean about it. You're right. It was different, Maria agreed. But do you remember what you told me at the end of that school year? You said that being different had taught you things about yourself that you never would have learned if you had fit in easily. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Maria sharing stories about times when she had faced discrimination and exclusion as a military spouse trying to build her own career. She reminded Sarah that strength wasn't about avoiding difficult situations, but about maintaining dignity and integrity while facing them. The next morning, Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of withdrawing from the conference, she decided to use the opportunity to educate others about the realities of military family life. She began expanding her research presentation to include discussion about how military children develop unique perspectives on adaptation, resilience, and global citizenship. Sarah spent the following weeks preparing intensively for the conference. She researched the backgrounds of other presenters, practiced her presentation repeatedly, and even reached out to some of the military contractors she had met at the career fair for additional insights about real-world applications of her research. Tom Peterson from Raytheon was particularly helpful, providing information about current military research priorities and suggesting ways that Sarah could frame her work in terms of broader national security implications. His encouragement reminded Sarah that there was a whole world beyond Riverside University, where her background and skills would be valued and appreciated. As the conference date approached, the harassment on campus seemed to intensify. Someone had printed flyers with Sarah's photo and distributed them around campus with the heading, "Fake Soldier Seeks Attention." The flyers listed various cruel comments about her appearance and questioned her right to represent the university. Sarah found one of the flyers taped to her dorm room door when she returned from the library late one evening. She stared at it for several minutes, feeling a mixture of hurt, anger, and determination. Instead of throwing it away immediately, she photographed it and saved it to her phone. She had decided to document the harassment, not because she planned to file complaints, but because she wanted to remember this experience and use it to help other students who might face similar situations in the future. The night before the conference, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Chen from the library knocked on her dorm room door, carrying a small gift bag and wearing an expression of concern and support. "I heard about what's been happening," Mrs. Chen said gently. "I wanted you to know that there are people on this campus who see your strength and admire your perseverance." Inside the gift bag was a professional-looking name badge holder and a handwritten note that read, "For a young woman who represents the best of what education should produce. Your intelligence, integrity, and resilience are inspiring. Go show them what you're made of." The simple gesture of kindness from Mrs. Chen reminded Sarah that not everyone on campus was caught up in the cruel social dynamics that had made her life so difficult. There were people who saw her as an individual rather than a stereotype, people who appreciated her authentic self rather than expecting her to conform to their expectations. That night, Sarah laid out her clothes for the conference. She chose her best military-style pants, her most professional-looking tactical boots, and a crisp white shirt. She added the army pin her father had given her and the new name badge holder from Mrs. Chen. Looking at herself in the mirror, she saw not a costume or a cry for attention, but a young woman who knew exactly who she was and where she came from. The morning of the regional academic conference arrived with crisp autumn weather that felt perfect for new beginnings. Sarah woke up earlier than usual, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement that she hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since starting at Riverside University, she was looking forward to an academic event where her ideas and research would be the focus rather than her appearance. Professor Williams had arranged for Sarah to ride with him and 2 other students to the conference, which was being held at the State University about 2 hours away. The other students, both upperclassmen from different departments, treated Sarah with the kind of casual respect that she had almost forgotten was normal. They discussed their respective research projects during the drive, and Sarah found herself relaxing into the kind of intellectual conversation she had been craving. When they arrived at the conference venue, Sarah was impressed by the professional atmosphere. The State University's conference center was bustling with students and faculty from universities across the region. Everyone seemed focused on their research presentations rather than on judging each other's appearance or social status. Sarah's presentation was scheduled for the afternoon session on innovative applications in chemical engineering. She used the morning to attend other presentations, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated her genuine interest in learning from her peers. During the lunch break, she met several students from other universities who were impressed by her questions and insights from the morning sessions. One graduate student from the State University, Marcus Thompson, struck up a conversation about Sarah's research topic and shared his own work on sustainable energy storage systems. "Your approach to combining military logistics with civilian energy needs is really innovative," Marcus said as they found seats in the crowded cafeteria. "I've never seen anyone think about energy storage from that angle before. Have you considered applying for graduate research programs?" This kind of interdisciplinary thinking is exactly what most programs are looking for. The conversation continued throughout lunch, with Marcus introducing Sarah to other graduate students and faculty members. For the first time in months, Sarah found herself in an environment where her military background was seen as an asset that brought unique perspective to her academic work rather than something that made her an outsider. When the afternoon session began, Sarah felt more confident than she had in any academic setting since arriving at Riverside. Her presentation was titled, "Sustainable Energy Solutions for Remote Military Operations, Bridging Civilian Innovation and Defense Applications." She had spent weeks refining her research and preparing visual aids that would help her audience understand the complex technical concepts. As Sarah approached the podium, she noticed that the audience included not just students and faculty, but also several individuals who appeared to be industry representatives. Among them was a woman in professional attire who looked vaguely familiar, though Sarah couldn't place where she might have seen her before. Sarah began her presentation with confidence, explaining how her childhood experiences living on remote military bases had given her insights into the unique energy challenges faced by military operations. She described how traditional power generation methods were often impractical in combat zones or temporary installations, and how civilian innovations in renewable energy could be adapted for military use. The technical portion of her presentation covered her team's research into portable solar collection systems that could be rapidly deployed and easily maintained by personnel without specialized training. She explained their innovations in battery storage technology and how they had improved efficiency while reducing weight and complexity. What set Sarah's presentation apart was her ability to connect the technical research to real-world military needs. She shared specific examples of situations where improved energy systems could save lives, reduce logistical burdens, and improve operational effectiveness. Her military upbringing allowed her to speak with authority about scenarios that most academic researchers could only imagine. During the question and answer session, Sarah fielded inquiries from professors, graduate students, and industry representatives, with poise and expertise that impressed everyone in the room. One professor from a prestigious engineering program asked about her future research plans, while a representative from a major defense contractor inquired about potential applications for current military contracts. The woman in professional attire who had caught Sarah's attention earlier raised her hand near the end of the session. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Dr. Rebecca Chen, Director of Research Partnerships at the State University. Your work represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we try to encourage in our graduate programs. I'd like to discuss potential opportunities for you to continue this research at our institution." Sarah felt her heart race with excitement. Dr. Chen was offering her the possibility of transferring to a university where her research would be valued and her background would be seen as an advantage rather than a source of ridicule. The opportunity represented everything she had been hoping for when she first started college. After her presentation ended, Sarah was surrounded by people wanting to continue the discussion. Faculty members from 3 different universities gave her their contact information, and 2 companies expressed interest in potential internships or research collaborations. For the first time since starting college, Sarah felt truly valued for her intelligence and potential rather than judged for her appearance. Professor Williams approached her as the crowd began to disperse. "Sarah, that was an outstanding presentation. I'm incredibly proud of how you represented our university today." He paused for a moment before continuing. "I have to ask, though, are you considering transferring?" Dr. Chen seemed quite serious about her offer. Sarah looked around at all the new connections she had made, at the business cards in her hand, from people who saw potential in her work, and at the environment where she had felt comfortable and respected for the first time in months. The contrast with her experience at Riverside University was stark and painful. "I don't know yet," she answered honestly, "but today has shown me what college could be like if I were somewhere that valued what I bring to the table." The drive back to Riverside was quiet, with each student processing their conference experiences. Sarah stared out the window at the passing landscape, thinking about Dr. Chen's offer and imagining what it would be like to start fresh somewhere new. She could leave behind the harassment, the social isolation, and the constant judgment of her classmates. But as they approached the Riverside campus, Sarah found herself thinking about Mrs. Chen's kindness, about the high school student Maya, who had looked up to her at the STEM fair, and about the principle her father had always taught her about not running from difficult situations. Maybe there was another way to handle the problems at Riverside, a way that didn't involve abandoning the fight entirely. That evening, Sarah sat in her dorm room reviewing the business cards and contact information she had collected at the conference. Each one represented a potential future, a path forward that would value her background and her research. But they also represented a choice between pursuing her own opportunities and staying to change the environment for other students who might face similar challenges. As she organized her materials from the conference, Sarah made a decision that would determine not just her own future, but the future of how Riverside University treated students who didn't fit conventional expectations. She began drafting emails to several of the contacts she had made, but not necessarily in the way they might have expected. Sarah's decision became clear as she worked late into the night responding to the contacts from the conference. Instead of simply accepting transfer opportunities or internship offers, she began proposing something more ambitious. She reached out to Tom Peterson at Raytheon, Dr. Chen at the State University, and General Hayes, suggesting a collaborative project that would bring military research expertise directly to Riverside University. Her proposal was bold. Establish a joint research program between Riverside University and major defense contractors that would give students hands-on experience with real military applications. The program would be designed specifically to bridge the gap between civilian academic research and practical defense needs, exactly the kind of innovative partnership that could put Riverside on the map as a leader in applied engineering. 3. Days after the conference, Sarah received a phone call that changed everything. Tom Peterson was calling to discuss her proposal with his superiors at Raytheon, and they were interested enough to schedule a formal presentation. Even more exciting, General Hayes had contacted his network of military and industry connections, several of whom wanted to learn more about Sarah's ideas. "Sarah," Tom said during their phone conversation, "your proposal has generated more excitement than anything we've seen in years. The combination of academic research with practical military applications, guided by someone who actually understands both worlds, is exactly what the defense industry has been looking for." The momentum built quickly. Within a week, Sarah found herself scheduled to present her research program proposal to a panel that included university administrators, defense industry representatives, and military officials. The presentation would take place at Riverside University, bringing high-profile visitors to a campus that had largely ignored her potential. As news of the upcoming presentation spread around campus, the social dynamics that had made Sarah's life difficult began to shift dramatically. Students who had mocked her military background suddenly realized that major corporations and government officials were taking her seriously enough to visit their small university specifically to hear her ideas. Professor Williams was thrilled about the attention Sarah's work was bringing to their chemistry department. "Sarah, This could be transformative for our entire program. Defense contractors don't typically look at universities like ours for research partnerships. If this works out, it could mean funding, internships, and career opportunities for students throughout our department. The day before the presentation, Sarah was walking across campus when she encountered Brad, Ashley, and Kevin from her chemistry group. For the first time since she'd known them, they seemed unsure of themselves in her presence. "Hey, Sarah," Ashley said hesitantly. "We heard about the big presentation tomorrow. That's really impressive." Brad, who had been the most cruel in his comments about her military background, shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, we didn't really understand what your research was about before. It sounds like it's actually pretty important." Sarah looked at the three students who had made her first semester so difficult. She could see the recognition in their eyes that they had completely misjudged her capabilities and the value of her background. Part of her wanted to make them squirm, to point out how wrong they had been and how their behavior had affected her. Instead, she chose a different approach. "The presentation is open to all students. If you're interested in learning about defense applications for chemical engineering, you're welcome to attend." Her gracious response seemed to surprise them, and Kevin spoke up for the first time. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. We were wrong about you and we didn't give you a fair chance. Your research is incredible, and the way you've handled everything, you're a lot stronger than any of us." The morning of the presentation, Sarah arrived at the university's main conference room to find it transformed. Audiovisual equipment had been set up for her slides, and the room was arranged to accommodate what appeared to be a much larger audience than she had expected. Mrs. Chen from the library was there early, helping to organize materials and providing moral support. "I'm so proud of you," Mrs. Chen whispered as Sarah reviewed her presentation one final time. "You've shown everyone what real strength and intelligence look like." As the audience began to arrive, Sarah was amazed by the caliber of people who had come to hear her proposal. Tom Peterson was there from Raytheon, along with two of his colleagues. Dr. Rebecca Chen had driven down from the State University with several faculty members. General Hayes was present in full dress uniform, accompanied by two other military officials, but perhaps most significantly, students from across campus had filled the remaining seats. Word had spread that something important was happening, and many students who had previously dismissed Sarah were now curious to see what had attracted so much high-level attention. Sarah began her presentation with confidence, explaining how her research had evolved from personal experience into a comprehensive proposal for university-industry collaboration. She outlined the specific benefits that military research partnerships could bring to civilian education, including funding, internships, cutting-edge equipment, and real-world problem-solving opportunities. The technical portion of her presentation was flawless, demonstrating not just her research capabilities but also her deep understanding of both academic and military cultures. She answered questions from industry representatives about practical applications, addressed concerns from university administrators about academic freedom, and explained to military officials how university partnerships could accelerate innovation. Near the end of her presentation, Sarah did something unexpected. She turned to address the students in the audience directly. "When I first came to Riverside University," she said, "many of you saw my military background as something strange or uncomfortable, but that background gave me insights that are now bringing opportunities to our entire university. The lesson isn't about military service specifically. It's about the value of different perspectives and experiences." She paused, making eye contact with several students who had been among her harshest critics. "Every one of you has a unique background that could lead to innovations and opportunities that no one else could imagine. The question is whether we're going to create an environment that encourages those differences or one that tries to suppress them." The room fell silent as students processed her words. Sarah could see recognition dawning on many faces as they realized the broader implications of what she was saying about diversity, inclusion, and the value of authentic self-expression. General Hayes stood up to respond to her presentation. "Ms. Martinez, your proposal is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that our military needs to stay ahead of evolving challenges. But more than that, Your presentation today has demonstrated leadership qualities that are rare at any age. He turned to address the entire room. This young woman has shown courage, integrity, and persistence in the face of significant adversity. Those are the qualities that make great officers, great researchers, and great leaders in any field. As the formal presentation concluded, the room erupted in applause. But the sound that made Sarah's heart soar wasn't just the polite clapping of the official visitors. It was the enthusiastic cheering from her fellow students, many of whom were seeing her clearly for the first time. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's proposal was approved and funded. Riverside University announced a new military applications research center, with Sarah as its first student director. Defense contractors began recruiting at the university for the first time, and several students received internship offers that would have been impossible before Sarah's initiative. More importantly, the campus culture began to change. Students started conversations about the value of diverse backgrounds and experiences. The anonymous social media account that had mocked Sarah was shut down, and its followers began following accounts that celebrated student achievements instead of tearing them down. Sarah never did transfer to another university. Instead, she helped transform Riverside into the kind of place where students with unconventional backgrounds could thrive. Her senior year, she was elected student body president on a platform of inclusion and innovation, running unopposed because her leadership had already proven itself. The girl who had been mocked for wearing army gear had done more than just survive the ridicule. She had used her unique background to create opportunities for everyone around her. And while no Apache, Gunship ever literally roared over the campus, Sarah's quiet revolution had been just as powerful in changing hearts, minds, and futures.